I never thought I'd be that wife, the one who checks her husband's phone. But there I was standing in our kitchen at 2 a.m. holding Mark's device with trembling hands. He'd left it charging on the counter and a notification had lit up the screen. Sarah's name appeared with a preview that made my blood run cold. We can't keep doing this behind her back. My heart hammered against my ribs as I swiped to unlock. I knew his passcode, our anniversary date. How ironic. The messages loaded and what I saw made me sink onto our kitchen stool. Months of conversations between my husband and his sister Sarah stretched before me. But these weren't casual family exchanges. The tone was intimate, secretive, urgent. I think about you constantly, one message read. This is eating me alive, said another. My hands shook as I scrolled through weeks of clandestine communication. They spoke about meeting in secret, about feelings they couldn't control, about the guilt consuming them both. The timestamps showed conversations happening while I was at work, during my business trips, even while I slept upstairs. I felt physically sick. Sarah, my sister-in-law who'd been my maid of honor, who helped me plan surprise parties for Mark, who I considered one of my closest friends. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? Every family dinner, every holiday gathering suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. Had they been laughing at me behind my back? The most recent message was from yesterday. She's getting suspicious. We need to tell her soon or this will destroy everything. Tell me what? That my marriage was a lie? That the two people I trusted most had been carrying on behind my back? I screenshot everything, my photographer's instinct kicking in even through my devastation. As I sat there in the darkness of my kitchen, surrounded by the life Mark and I had built together, I realized nothing would ever be the same. The foundation of my world had cracked, and I was free-falling into an abyss of betrayal and heartbreak. Tomorrow I would have to face them both, pretending I didn't know their secret while I figured out what to do next. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages burned into my retinas. Mark stirred beside me around 6 a.m., and I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming at him. How could he lie there so peacefully when he'd destroyed our marriage? When he reached over to kiss me goodbye before work, I turned away, claiming I felt sick. It wasn't entirely a lie. After he left, I called in sick to my photography studio and spent the morning pacing our house like a caged animal. Every photo on our walls seemed to mock me. Our wedding day, family vacations with Sarah, holiday celebrations where she'd hugged me and told me how lucky Mark was to have me. All lies. All elaborate performances while they conducted their affair right under my nose. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers and I needed them now. I drove to Sarah's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. She lived alone in a trendy downtown loft that Mark had helped her find. Another red flag I'd missed. How many times had he helped her with things while I was working? Sarah answered the door in yoga clothes, her face lighting up when she saw me. Emma. What a surprise. Come in, I was just about to make coffee. Her casual demeanor made my stomach churn. How could she act so normal when she'd been sleeping with my husband? We need to talk, I said, pushing past her into the living room. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots. The color drained from her face instantly. I know about you and Mark. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She sank onto her couch, her hands covering her face. Emma, it's not what you think. Really? I laughed bitterly. Because it looks pretty clear to me. Months of secret messages talking about feelings you can't control meeting behind my back. What exactly am I misunderstanding? Tears started streaming down Sarah's face. You don't understand. We never crossed that line. Not the way you think. Her words confused me. What line? What was she talking about? Emma, please sit down. There's something you need to know, something we should have told you years ago. If you enjoyed the story, leave your comment, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Sarah's tears weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of fear. As I sat across from her, studying her face, I began to notice something I'd never paid attention to before. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Features that suddenly seemed familiar in a way that made my chest tight. Emma, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. Mark and we're not having an affair. We're trying to figure out how to tell you the truth about who I really am. What are you talking about? I demanded, but something in her tone made my anger waver. Sarah stood up and walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a small wooden box I'd seen dozens of times but never questioned. She opened it with shaking hands and pulled out a birth certificate, a hospital bracelet, and several old photographs. She handed them to me without a word. The birth certificate was mine. But the mother's name wasn't the woman who raised me. It was Sarah's mother, Linda. The hospital bracelet was tiny, meant for a newborn, with my name and birth date. And the photographs showed a teenage girl holding a baby. The girl looked exactly like Sarah, but younger. Much younger. I was 15 when I had you, Sarah said quietly. Mom and Dad made me give you up. They said I was too young, that it would ruin my life. They arranged for you to be adopted by their friends, the people you call Mom and Dad. They promised I could still be in your life, just not as your mother. The room spun around me. I stared at the documents in my hands, trying to process what she was saying. You're my mother? I've watched you grow up, celebrated every milestone, been there for every important moment in your life. When you married Mark, I was so happy because it meant I could stay close to you. But lately, the secret has been killing both of us. Mark figured it out about 6 months ago. He said I looked at you the way his mother looked at him. He's been helping me find the courage to tell you. Those messages suddenly made sense in an entirely different way. The guilt, the secrecy, the fear of destroying everything. It wasn't about an affair. It was about a family secret that had been hidden for 28 years. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the birth certificate that rewrote my entire identity. Sarah, my sister-in-law, my friend, my maid of honor, was my mother. The woman who raised me wasn't my biological mother, and the parents I'd loved and trusted had built my entire life on a lie. Why now? I whispered. Why tell me now after all these years? Sarah sat back down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Because you and Mark have been trying to have a baby for 2 years. You've been going through all those fertility treatments, spending thousands of dollars, putting your body through hell. But Emma, there's something else you need to know about your medical history. Something that might explain why you're having trouble conceiving. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Your biological father. He had a genetic condition that can affect fertility. It's something that could be treated if the doctors knew to look for it, but it's rare enough that they wouldn't test for it unless they knew your family history. I've been watching you suffer through failed treatments, knowing I might have information that could help, but I was too scared to speak up. The weight of this revelation crushed down on me. Not only had my entire identity been a lie, but my struggle to have children, the source of so much pain and frustration in my marriage, might have been solved months ago if I'd known the truth. Mark has been begging me to tell you, Sarah continued. He said it wasn't fair to let you keep suffering when we might have answers. Those messages you saw, we were planning to tell you this weekend. We'd arranged for your parents, your adoptive parents, to come over Sunday so we could all talk together. I thought about all the times Sarah had been there for me during my fertility struggles. How she'd held me when I cried after negative pregnancy tests, how she'd researched alternative treatments, how she'd never missed a single doctor's appointment when I asked her to come for support. I'd thought she was just being a good friend and sister-in-law. But she was being a mother, watching her daughter suffer and feeling helpless to ease that pain. The people who raised me, I said slowly, do they know that you were planning to tell me? Sarah nodded. They've known this day would come eventually. They love you, Emma. They raised you, they're your real parents in every way that matters. But they also understand that you have a right to know your medical history, especially now. 3 months later, I sat in Dr. Martinez's office, holding Mark's hand as she delivered news that changed everything. The genetic testing Sarah had suggested revealed exactly what she'd suspected, a treatable condition that had been preventing me from carrying a pregnancy to term. With the right medication and monitoring, Dr. Martinez was confident we could conceive successfully. But that wasn't the biggest surprise waiting for me that day. There's something else, Dr. Martinez said with a smile. The blood work we did last week shows that you're already pregnant. About 6 weeks along. The treatment we started appears to be working perfectly. I stared at her in shock, then looked at Mark, whose eyes were filling with tears. After 2 years of heartbreak and failed attempts, we were finally going to have a baby. And it was only possible because Sarah had found the courage to tell me the truth. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. Learning that Sarah was my biological mother had initially felt like a betrayal, but gradually, I began to understand the impossible position she'd been in as a 15-year-old girl. My adoptive parents had been incredibly supportive, helping me process the revelation and assuring me that their love for me hadn't changed. Sarah and I were still navigating our new relationship. She wasn't trying to replace my mom and I wasn't calling her mother. But there was a new depth to our connection, an understanding that explained the inexplicable bond I'd always felt with her. As Mark and I drove home from the doctor's office, my hand resting on my still flat stomach, I thought about the message that had started this whole journey. We can't keep doing this behind her back. At the time I'd interpreted it as evidence of betrayal. But it had actually been evidence of love. Two people who cared about me struggling with how to give me information that might help me achieve my deepest dream. Sometimes the most shocking discoveries aren't about deception and betrayal. Sometimes they're about love that's been hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And sometimes, what looks like the end of your world is actually the beginning of understanding who you really are and where you really came from. The baby growing inside me would know their full family history from day one. They'd grow up surrounded by love from grandparents, parents, and a grandmother who'd been disguised as an aunt for 28 years. What had started as my worst nightmare had become the foundation for our family's greatest joy.